much. Thank you so much for being here and for tuning in to Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And today's episode is about the passive aggressive narcissist. Now, I talk a lot about narcissism. It's bad enough to be in the presence of a narcissist or be involved in a narcissistic type of relationship. But to make matters worse, when they get passive on you, that's just another whole new ball game that we're going to dive into. And rather than being passive aggressive, I'm going to be blunt and to the point so that you can hopefully learn something tonight. And this is a call-in show, everybody. So please feel free to call in, and that number is 323-524-2599. You all know by now that I do prefer call-ins rather than questions in the chat room. However, if you're just too shy or don't like to be on air for whatever reason, I remember I didn't at some point, and then thankfully I overcame it so I could be here with you guys tonight. I understand I'll take questions in the chat room too. So, what is a passive aggressive narcissist? Is there a question there? No, no question. Okay. What is a passive aggressive narcissist? Well, we all know the definition of passive, which is that they're not very forthcoming. There's no overt aggression. And then we all know what aggressive means, which is harming, going against, uh, deliberately going against to harm. And so putting them together, when you use your passivity to harm another person, we have now passive aggressive behavior. When you couple it with narcissism, which is extremely self serving and is a pathological personality disorder, defined by lack of empathy, defined by desire to control and manipulate, is defined by an inner core self that has a core injury of not wanting to lose control, or deeper, even a fear of abandonment, but that's well covered up by the defense mechanisms. So, me, myself personally, I've met obviously in life and in my treatment room passive aggressives, passive aggressive narcissists. I've met people who are overt narcissists and covert narcissists. And I think personally, my least favorite, and that's why I'm doing the show so that people can really understand why it's so sneaky and overt and dangerous and destructive, the passive aggressive, which is a covert narcissistic maneuver. Um, the passive aggressive covert narcissist who manipulates and controls and punishes through lack of attention, lack of participation, punishing you through withdrawal of their emotions and connection. So I want to preface this by saying that profoundly so, we as a human race have a really incredible desire to be connected and interconnected, and we want to be part of the human race in the sense of playing a game of life that involves um, all of the basic things that we hopefully got as children, like eye contact and skin contact, and the ability to play off of each other and learn and grow from each other and manifest synergy, which is my favorite word, which is the 1 plus 1 is greater than 2 phenomenon. We want to play that game in life, not only with ourselves, but with people. We want to play that game of life so that we can be stimulated, we can enhance ourselves, we can get feedback, we can somehow be a better form of ourselves and also make a difference to other people. But with passive aggressive narcissism, there's no real desire to connect except for the self and self alone, which puts it in the manipulation category. So when you're driven by narcissistic tendencies to serve the self. And let's mind map this a little bit so that you can understand it a little bit better through the picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you can put that mind map up there, let's break it down. So we have all 9 panels there, and you could see the first 3 panels represent the past and how we were encoded. So starting there, we see panel 1, which is the wound. So how were these people wounded that leads them to manifest passive aggressive narcissistic behavior? Well, first of all, we know that we all have light within us. So we have some sort of contribution to the world. We come with light. We hopefully have conditions in our life that will help us manifest our light, parenting that encourages us and gives us boundaries and teaches us lessons and principles and ethics and morals and all of that, and also sets the stage for the mirroring process, which I described earlier, the eye contact, the skin contact, the ability to do a feedback loop with your original family, primarily your mother and your father, your immediate caretakers, because they're the ones that give you the light. However, it doesn't work out that way. It never works out that way. On some level, we are all blocked by some kind of a dark shadow, whether it be verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, smothering and control, some sort of a narcissistic an empathetic parent, something is going to block our pathway to feeling good about ourselves and feeling whole and complete. In the case of the passive aggressive narcissist, let's think about this carefully. Why would they go passive and not just throw a fit? Well, I'm thinking that if passive aggressive is some sort of a defense mechanism, which it is, they want to go over, not overt, meaning they don't want to overtly express themselves because that pathway in their growing up formative years has been closed off. So rather than fighting back with mom and dad or being able to express, somehow their expression was punished or thwarted or ignored or something along those lines. Because now what's open to them is a pathway of of covert aggression. So that doesn't mean that they're any less angry. It's just that this anger is not expressed physically. So instead of receiving a slap on the face by a narcissist, you're now receiving um, an unplugging of their emotional input into you, which is actually on some level even more damaging because let's refer to the prison system and what the most incredibly painful punishment is, and that is solitary confinement. So when we put another human being on extinction, when we ignore them, then it's going to really, really hurt. And their reaction is going to be different than just being stunned by a slap in the face. And I don't mean this that I think it's a great idea to receive a slap on the face. It's just that it's out there, it's overt. You can maybe block it, you can defend against it, you can slap them back if you want. But with covert narcissists, they will do something that doesn't necessarily feel like a punishment because it's confusing. They're not overtly hurting you, they're covertly hurting you. And then you don't know what to do with that. You start to question it and you feel gaslit like, really? Did they not call me back because they're busy? Did they not call me back because I said something wrong? Did I do something wrong? So it takes you on a bad trip within yourself and you start to question yourself regarding your own behavior. You start to question. So, in other words, instead of questioning their behavior, it loops back upon you and makes you the villain of yourself, in essence. So now we don't really have a clear identified aggression, aggressive kind of behavior. You have some sort of a passive behavior going on, and that doesn't always register as aggression. On the contrary, it might even register as, well, he's meditating, or she's piecing out, or she's just being polite and quiet, or yeah, I don't deserve to be called back because I didn't do something that they requested. So I'm going to give you a real live example of somebody that I actually knew that I no longer associate with for obvious reasons and keep the names innocent. But it's a really great example of a husband and wife that I watched get together. They were at first girlfriend and boyfriend. There was an extreme age difference between them of over actually a 25-year age difference between them. The male was older than the female, and the woman had just gotten out of a brutal marriage. I think her parents forced her into marrying a guy that actually raped her. And so you can understand that her boundaries were completely violated, they were completely destroyed. And she was looking for a better father figure who could take her under his wings and protect her and give her some level of security. And of course, she was beautiful and wanted children and all that. Now, unbeknownst to her, the deal came with a very hard bargain. And that bargain included things like her um, being available to him in ways that maybe she wasn't exactly counting on, but I would watch her do things like lift objects, for example, things that a man should be carrying into the house. If there were heavy objects to be carried into the house, I noticed that he sat back and had his tea, and she would jump outside and get all the things from outside and bring them in, whether they were luggage or whatever, groceries, didn't really matter. But I noticed that pretty soon she became a little slave, and it seemed natural to her because this is how it went with her family of origin. And I remember her family of origin because I met them. And in her family of origin, she was not exactly the favored child. She was not very special in her family. And all of these things led to her being vulnerable to this type of passive aggressive narcissism. And what I recall is that oftentimes she would call me up and say, you know, my husband's not answering my phone calls. I don't know why he's angry at me. I asked him, but he wouldn't say why. Um, I'm running out of money. He cut off the credit cards. He's not saying anything to me. It's now day 3. Can I borrow some money from you? Can I stay with you? I feel scared. I feel scared for our son. And this went on, and would rear its ugly head time to time in the relationship. But somehow um, she had to apologize to him for whatever reason he deemed was her participation in the fault of the marriage. And then she would be in his good graces. And what does that do specifically? It locked her into the behavior of being his slave and being receptive to his passive aggressive behavior. So now the dynamics looked like he was the protector and she needed protection, and he wanted power and control, and she was very beautiful, so he didn't want to lose her. So he made himself rare and difficult uh, to reach, and so she had to jump through hoops to reach him, which in her mind made him more valuable because when she finally did get the prize, his attention, it felt amazing and relieving and nurturing. And that's sort of like what I call the cycle of violence. So let's go back to the mind map and mind map this a little bit so you could see his wound was that he came from a family that completely minimalized him. His brother was always number one. She also came from a family that minimalized her and put her in jeopardy, actually. And so he was looking for power and control in his relationship, and she was looking for safety and protection in her relationship. And the reaction of her was that she got scared every time she felt abandoned. And his reaction was that every time he lost some kind of power and control over her, he got scared of losing the power and control. So you could see how the relationships fit like hand in glove. Now, if you look at panel number 3, you could see that there's an encoding there, and the encoding of each one of them is a little bit different because his encoding on the surface was a very narcissistic encoding that he felt that he was top of the line, extremely smart, very special, only deserved to be around special people, only deserved very beautiful women, which she was, only deserved the best. And her core belief had a little smidgen of that also, but on a deeper level, her whole psychological makeup wound around not being abandoned and being protected and have a safety net around her. So, of course, he made the money and she looked after the kid, and that was the deal. It's just that it wasn't synergistic because you could see over the years, and I knew them for several years before the friendship ended, but over the years, you could see that she was growing older. And not that she wasn't really growing older, we all grow older, but there was something that lacked luster about her. She used to be kind of, pep in her step kind of person and creative and happy go lucky. And you could just see that there was something morose going on. And to keep herself pumped up, she would drink tons and tons of coffee to keep the stimulation going. So I would call her kind of a coffee addict, and he would be a workaholic and disappear into his work for hours at a time. And so the relationship became quickly imbalanced. I don't know what the happy or sad ending was between this couple, but I can tell you that she felt depleted and scared and out of control. And the passive part also had to do with his control of the money. So everything was in his account, all the credit cards were in his name. He paid all the bills. She didn't know what the family finances were. Everything really was under his control. So you could see that behind this passive aggressive narcissist was a real fear of loss and control. So in order to get the hands on his reins of control, he had to do these passive, aggressive, controlling behaviors. So are you with me so far? Any questions in the chat room?
No questions yet.
No questions yet. Okay. So we'll go on to see how people who are passive aggressive destabilize their partners. So if we go to panel number 4, you could see that panel number 4 represents chaos. The bonds are falling apart. There's no north, south, east, west. People are flailing around in a toxic environment. And so her grasping at straws of security, which he provided financially, and they had a nice home and a car and, all the basic things, but emotionally, she felt that she could be dropped or ignored or narsed out, as they say. So, meaning completely shut out, which she was several times. So, part of the strategy of a narcissistic passive aggressive is they like to keep their partner destabilized. It's always the case that the person living with them is walking on eggshells, questioning their mind, questioning what they did wrong, questioning why they deserved it, or maybe they did deserve it. And from their point of view, because their background was so pathological and wounded, they feel on some level they make up a good story to prove that they did deserve it. So do you see how it's a hand and glove thing? The two pieces fit together. It's not just one functioning in a vacuum, it's another participant that feeds the ego of the passive aggressive narcissist, who feeds the lie of the passive aggressive narcissist, the lie being that they're right and the other's wrong, and there's the imbalance. There's never any accountability and certainly no discussion about it. So let's say she would attempt to have a conversation with this person and say, why did you lock me out of the house? What kind of a thing is that to do to me, your wife, and the mother of the children? Um, there would be no discussion about it other than, well, think about what you did, or think about what you said, or think about what you promised and didn't do, or think about how you didn't do something that I requested you to do. So it would always be back on the other person. So even though the passive aggressive narcissist seems to have a lot of ego strength, they actually don't. They derive their ego and ego strength out of power and control, which I assure you is not the kind of strength you want to fuel yourself on. It's sort of like fueling yourself on poison, and yeah, the poison might stimulate you or make you feel strong for a minute, but then it'll not only poison you, but it'll poison your environment, and it's not sustainable. So you can see that the power and control causes this massive chaos, this massive, not only physical chaos, but I remember this person getting headaches, and I remember her breaking down and losing weight and getting thinner and not eating properly and not sleeping properly. So, this is not only a mental breakdown, it is also a physical, somatic breakdown. And I remember times when she would call me and say that she was suicidal, and I would have to give her the number or direct her to the number of the suicide hotline center or encourage her to go into therapy, not with me because we were too close. Um, and even though I offered her the best advice that I could and the best support that I could, she was very glued, very stuck on her husband, who was her only support system. So for her, she was his universe. She was everything that she needed to float through life, even though her life was slowly decaying. So if we look at panel number 5 and talk about defense mechanisms, her defense mechanism against this tragic lifestyle that she was leading was um, getting slimmer and slimmer so that she can look sexier and sexier and control him through her sexuality. That was clearly a defense mechanism that she was engaged in. Also, I remember her drinking tons and tons of coffee. So, stimulation, caffeine, that was another defense mechanism. And idealizing of her husband. She would think that he was the best thing ever, so she would put him on a throne and elevate him many miles, millions of miles into the sky, like she was revolving around the sun. And even though he was doing all these nasty things to her, she really thought he was a remarkable, amazing human being. So she wouldn't let the reality of who he was seep into her psyche, which kept her justified in staying there. And of course, she had a kid and no money and no power. So she was in a hostage situation, to say the least. But you could tell that that her the defense mechanisms were um, in line in keeping her stuck in the system that she didn't feel that she had the strength to exit out of. And of course, he was delighted that he had her stuck in her defense mechanism because it was more power and control to him. So if you look at the orbs, he was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and puffing up like a true narcissist, and she was getting smaller and smaller and less significant and sort of disappearing into the background. And whenever he needed her, whether it be for sex or cleaning the house or taking some item into the house or cooking or um, anything like that, he would take her off the shelf. But otherwise, she would stay on that shelf, and he remained in power and control. So you could see how destructive this passive aggressive narcissistic behavior can be to a relationship. And ultimately, it is meant to break down, but sometimes it sustains for way too long. And thank you. There's a question in the chat room, and yeah.
Yes, so this question is, how do you know someone is a passive aggressive narcissist and not just moody? Asking because my mom gives me the silent treatment for days.
Well, I think if your mom is giving you the silent treatment for days, then it's not a good sign, because that's not the way you're supposed to communicate with people. Okay, so whether she's a true narcissist, according to the diagnostics, if you give somebody the silent treatment, let's go through it. You lack empathy, correct? Because you know they're suffering, right? So, on some level, you lack empathy. You're trying to power and control over that person because you're not really allowing them to have a conversation with you and repair. So, there's no repair. All the repair is according to whether you're going to allow for it or not, and usually not. And so, I think that any kind of behavior like that tends towards the narcissistic spectrum. It just has to. It's too selfish. It's too unempathic. And so let's go over the hallmarks of narcissism: a lack of ability to feel, power and control, the inability to truly connect on a vulnerable level, which would be a conversation that your mother would theoretically have with you if she had a problem with something. Um, Lack of skills, just general lack of skills of communicating your hurt and your feelings. So it seems like all roads point to her lack of empathy. And if you want, call in or just put a note in the chat room. Did she also have a um, a backdrop of lack of empathy in your childhood? Did you experience her as warm and nurturing, or is it trending toward the narcissistic spectrum of control, power, lack of empathy, using you to fill her hole in the soul, um, gaslighting you, etc.? So does that seem congruent to who she's been being all along?
This patient said, yes, I think about this a lot lately. She seemed warm to other people, but with me, it felt like warm with strings attached. She'd be affectionate when I did well in school or looked a certain way, but if I messed up or had feelings she didn't like, she'd either go cold or act like I was too sensitive.
Right. So you could see that the world revolved around what she wanted, and you were a reflection of who she needed you to be, not who you were being, but more along the lines that if she didn't like the way you were, your grades weren't good, or the way you dressed or behaved weren't publicly well received, she would give you the evil eye, or worse, ignore you. And so this is very controlling, as you could see, and manipulative, and it's hard to approach because, by nature of their passive aggressiveness, the passive part doesn't allow for you to really um, connect and converse and find out what's behind um, their hurt. So really, they're hurt and they're upset, but they're not hurt and upset because of something necessarily that you did. It's just that they're hurt and upset because you're not pleasing them. So do you see where the emphasis is? They're in the consciousness of you please me. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And the kind of trouble you're in is I refuse to connect with you. I refuse to acknowledge your being. You don't matter to me. You're insignificant. Okay, so these are the messages really that encode into the fiber of their being. So if you look at panel number 3, the encoding panel, the encoding is I don't matter. I'm only here to please. No matter what I do is not good enough for you. Um, in terms of the passivity, I don't know how to approach you without being demeaned, devalued, and destroyed. So there's a lot of demeaning and devaluing and destroying types of encodings that you pick up over the years, so that when she pulls something like that, it immediately triggers your negative core belief of not mattering and not being good enough and not being lovable and not being important. And so you start feeling like a human doing and not like a human being, meaning that what's more significant is what you do for her or not do for her, over who you are to her and the meaningfulness of the relationship. So you could see that the meaningfulness is out of the picture. It's all about doingfulness, if you will. So how do you approach a mother like that? I hope you don't live with her. I hope that you don't depend on her. I hope that you have other people that are more nurturing than that. And I hope that you're not hooking up with somebody who's a passive aggressive, because as I titled my show, Dr. Judy WTF with the Freud, we tend to repeat the past. And if we cannot fix the past through connection and conversation and growth and epiphanies and wisdom realizations, we just keep trying to repeat the past by picking people who replicate this passive aggressive, demeaning, devaluing type of treatment, and then you sign up for that again. So, question to you, question in the main room. Are you picking relationships that are like that for yourself? Are you involved in it with people, either friends uh, or spouse or family members or significant others or bosses, anybody significant in your life giving you the cold, passive aggressive shoulder other than your mother? So if you can answer that question, then I could tell you more about where this is going for you.
That same person just said, now that I'm noticing it with my mom, I'm kind of seeing it in other people too. Like my ex boyfriend was super sarcastic all the time. He made jokes about me being lazy if I needed rest. And then when I'd say it hurt, he'd say things like, "You're so sensitive. I was just kidding."
Yeah, those are typical narcissistic words. Look up narcissistic phrases, and that's just textbook. You're too sensitive. I was just joking. Textbook, okay? So here you are repeating upon yourself what your mother trained you to accept. So now you start accepting the unacceptable, and you become sort of like the person that I described in the previous scenario, where the woman is kowtowing to the person who needs that power and control and starts questioning their own mind. That's an amazingly um, destructive form of gaslighting, when we start questioning our own mind and we don't recognize things to be as they are according to the pathology that's right in front of our eyes. If we can't open our eyes and say, this person is sick and ridiculous, and I'm not going to tolerate this, And if they want to play that game, I'm out. Sometimes you've got to fold the cards and not play into their deck of cards. Because if you're playing into their deck of cards, they're going to continue to spin you around and and win hands down, so to speak. So if you're engaged in this what the Freud behavior, I'm going to recommend that you go back into your childhood. If you want to do it through our team, the mind map, or buy my video, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse, which is available. And it's a do-it-yourself therapy, and you can purchase it and download it if you would put it up on the screen so people could see it and they can know that they can purchase it if they want. Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. Thank you very much. And it's the Mind Map Journey video series, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. And it's a step-by-step process to help you identify childhood wounds like narcissistic, passive-aggressive mothers and relationships that you enter into because you've been blueprinted that way, and how you get gaslit by these people and you repeat things over and over until you confront the shadow, until you confront that piece of you that you yourself find unacceptable, that piece of you that doubts yourself, that piece of you that kowtows to other individuals who are trying to gain power and control over you. And until you get that part of yourself back, you're always going to be giving it away to other people and find yourself in the same story. Okay, so that's why we keep finding ourselves in the same story, even though the characters change. Remember, Shakespeare would comment that all the world is the stage and the actors are just there to be um, changing the scenario and the messages and so on. But in your case, your messages are coming straight at you. Stop, 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 stop buying into their passive aggressive behavior. Do not allow this to take place. Put your pride and put um, yourself before their need to manipulate and control you, because that's really what they're trying to do. And until you get that right, you're going to be spinning around in a story. Okay? So please be aware of that. If you want to connect with me, I think you guys know how to do that through the Psychological Healing Center. And you can always write me at Dr. Judy at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And you could purchase the video on my website, psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And you can also get assistance through one of our team members to help you through recovering from narcissistic abuse, because it doesn't go away. It just doesn't go away. That's my other website, Healing Global Disconnect. You should check that out too. But my regular website is psychologicalhealingcenter.com, and that's my other original video of healing from narcissistic abuse, of just narcissistic. The original website was more generic. It was geared toward healing from childhood wounds. The second video is geared toward healing from narcissistic abuse. So they're slightly different. The second one is more specific and in depth toward narcissistic abuse. So please remember the what the Freud, everybody watch out for your what the Freud, which is your tendency to repeat things because you're not complete with them, because you've been blueprinted that way, and the pattern just keeps manifesting over and over again. Back to my story about this couple, his the man's father favored the brother, so he was clearly given the message that he was not number one. And so he needed to gain that power and control. And so he found somebody that was weak enough to always put him number one, no matter what his behavior. So if he was passive aggressive, if he locked her out of the house, he was always number one, because really, where's she going to go? Remember, childhood is a hostage situation, and when you're weakened down, you know, it's easy to see from an outside view. Oh, look at that beautiful couple. What a beautiful um, woman he got, 25 years younger. But let's take a look at the reality. Wow, 25 years younger, coming out of a domestic violence situation where the parents forced her to marry a man that raped her. And now here she is in bed, literally, physically, with somebody who is wielding a new type of abuse upon her, a passive aggressive abuse. But, you know, she can justify it by saying, well, he's not raping me, he's not beating me, he's feeding me, we've got a nice enough place to live. So, you know, there are all kinds of justifications people use to um, to quell their anxiety over being in a sick hostage situation, because that's really what it is. If she pulled out of the system, if somebody would guarantee her confidence, you know, remember Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, if somebody gave her courage like the lion, if they rewarded her with courage, she would be able to face the passiveness and say, not aggressively, but assertively, because the opposite of aggressive is assertion. She could assertively say, you know, next time, or if ever you pull a 3 day stunt or a 1 day stunt like that of cutting me off, if you don't have the decency to speak to me directly about what is bothering you and be my partner in healing whatever disconnects we have, I'm out. But people are too scared to get out of a relationship because there's a lot invested. And I'm not suggesting to automatically divorce or drop people. My philosophy has always been number one, don't drop the person, drop the problem. But that means the two people have to face the problem, confront the problem, resolve the problem, and then prioritize the relationship. In the case of passive aggressive narcissists, they won't face the problem because that's too embarrassing to them. They won't confront the problem because that's losing control over themselves. And now they're, instead of being able to blame the problem on something else, they actually have to do something that narcissists hate to do. They just don't know, they steer clear away from self-reflecting and self-correcting. They will never apologize. They'll demand apologies, but they don't themselves apologize. So don't expect that from a narcissist, overt or covert. But the passive aggressive ones are just really sneaky and underhanded, and they hurt by pretending that they're not hurting, and that's even more. Um, it's subterfuge. It's like yeah, it's sneakily, underhandedly manipulating somebody without appearing as though they are harmful, horrible people, but they are. Okay, so let's not forget that. Any comments in the chat room?
That person who was asking the other questions just said thank you, Dr. Judy.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope that helps. And if you're still stuck in it, please don't be. You know, part of the reason that I've been doing this for 10 years plus, right, Tony? I think 10 years plus is because I really enjoy my work. I love being a psychologist. I love the mind map work that I do. And mainly, I love to make a difference to other people's lives. So, if I can solve a problem in your life that is needing to be solved, and you're willing to, so to speak, bare your psychological soul, okay, so that we can get down to it, I think that's the way out of the mess, is just to be vulnerable. Because without vulnerability, you know, like even when you go to your medical doctor, you have to be vulnerable. You have to have your blood drawn, which is being vulnerable. You have to take your clothes off sometimes to get yourself checked. You've got to be vulnerable and tell them what's bothering you and expose your frailties. So, in psychology, too, to be vulnerable, which narcissists hate to be, that's how you get help and that's how you get healing is you expose your vulnerability. It's sort of like exposing your darkness to the light of the wisdom of your psychologist or your therapist. You've got to start with exposing your darkness because otherwise that darkness will just sort of like cook you in your own darkness. It'll lock you down. It'll keep you stuck. It won't allow you to grow. So on to bigger and better things, which is panel number 789. I just want to cover a little territory there. So if you can go to 789, this is the opposite of narcissism. It's the opposite of passive aggressive. You can see panel 8 is a paradigm shift. We're basing our life on truth, integrity, human principles that add value to others, add value to ourselves, and create more light. So it's the 1 plus 1 is greater than 2 phenomenon. We all want that kind of relationship. Those are the kinds of relationships that I'm personally interested in. Other ones are just too draining and too boring, and just like not for me. And that leads us to getting with people who are true growth partners who help each other up the evolutionary scale. And you could see that the toxicity in panel number 8, the healing panel, is gone. There's clean, clear water. There's the planet Earth, which roots us into growth and spirals up to uh, higher levels of seeing and being and interconnection and a new encoding, a new DNA, and that all is geared to lead toward a balanced, peaceful, united humanity where we're in balance with nature and other animals, other species, plant life, and in balance with our own human race. And that was that last panel, healing global disconnect, which is what I want to focus on next, okay? Yet to come. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Good night, everybody.